The hidden camera reality show, Candid Camera, is one of the most successful TV shows of all time. Each episode is composed of a few vignettes in which concealed cameras film ordinary people finding themselves in bizarre situations, and they're put on the spot. There are usually actors involved who set it up, and at the end of the interaction, the unsuspecting and bewildered subjects hear the show's catchphrase, "Smile, you're on Candid Camera," and the joke's revealed. One of my favorite episodes, and I think I know them all, takes place in a Chicago diner where the Candid Camera actor sits at the counter with a cider donut. The seat next to him is empty. First comes along an intimidatingly tough-looking guy with a Harley-Davidson scarf wrapped around his head. He sits next to the actor who's absorbed in his newspaper. While still staring at the newspaper, the actor reaches across the man, sticks his donut in the man's coffee, and takes a bite. The Harley-Davidson man grins broadly, looks around incredulously, and starts cracking up. He says, "Oh, can I buy you a cup of coffee?" And the actor casually responds, "Oh, no, thank you. I don't really like coffee. I just like the taste, and I only wanted one dunk anyway." Later on, another unsuspecting customer comes along, and when the actor reaches across and avails him of this man's coffee, the man asks with good-natured sarcasm, "Is it sweet enough for you? You want me to add a little sugar?" These men are open to having a good time with this weird neighbor, and it's delightful to watch. Their sense of humor prevails. Apparently, during the many years this show was on the air, there were very few people who reacted with hostility when they were told, "Smile, you're on Candid Camera." And you can't help but be uplifted when you watch these shows and you see these strangers interacting. The original meaning of the word stranger referred to someone who came from a foreign land and was passing through, so they were different in loyalty and language, in culture and in custom. Keo Stark, who wrote the book When Strangers Meet, How People You Don't Know Can Transform You, offers several somewhat conflicting definitions of a stranger. The entire world of people you've never met or encountered, or someone who is not part of any group you define yourself as belonging to, or someone you cannot understand, or someone you encounter frequently but don't know anything about other than what you can observe. Depending on how we define stranger, our experience of a stranger can lead us to curiosity or to war. In our own communities, our experience of a stranger can bring us closer or divide us in misunderstanding. Our own experience of strangers depends on where we're coming from in any given moment, whether we're alone or with someone, whether we're near home or traveling, whether we're tired or we're rested. When we're going about our routine day, we're pretty much in our own heads a lot of the time, and we miss these opportunities to connect that can be transformative. One study by behavioral scientists Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton recruited people on their way into a busy urban Starbucks and gave them each a $5 gift card. Some of them were told to go in and buy a coffee and interact with the cashier, smile, make eye contact, have a little conversation. And the others were told, get in, get out, get on with your day. The people who interacted more fully reported that when they left Starbucks, they felt more cheerful and had a generally better sense of belonging. Another study showed that when one person took the initiative to talk to another in a waiting room, that both people, not just the person who initiated the conversation, had a more positive experience wherever they were. Nicholas Epley is the behavioral scientist who designed this study, and he said that this was one of the few research projects that actually changed the way he lived his life. These studies by behavioral scientists show how influential encounters can be with strangers. Keo Stark, who wrote the book about how strangers can transform us, calls these encounters exquisite interruptions, because they change the expectations we may have had about our day, and because they connect us in community. So we have varying degrees of comfort depending on whether we're more introverted or extroverted, varying degrees of comfort of engaging with strangers. And of course, it depends on how we define strangers. Before we can connect with strangers, we need to see where we might have some fear, some sense that we might say something stupid, or feel rejected, or feel vulnerable. Now, some of us don't experience that fear, or not much anyway. One friend I talked with over the phone at the height of the pandemic when we were sheltering in place, she told me one of the things she missed most was interacting with strangers on the sidewalk and in restaurants. Another friend of mine a couple of weeks ago was telling me just before Thanksgiving that she couldn't wait for Thanksgiving. She was planning to spend the day alone at home in the morning and then go to her favorite diner, order a big breakfast, and talk to whoever sat down next to her. Some of us, though, are a little less so extroverted or connected to strangers, maybe feel it's a little more risky, feel a greater sense of vulnerability. Brené Brown, the author of The Power of Vulnerability, writes that vulnerability is the core of shame and fear and our struggle for worthiness, but it's also the birthplace of joy and creativity, of belonging and love. She describes how we develop our sense of worthiness, of love and belonging, when we have the courage to be just a little imperfect. And in doing so, we invite others to be a little imperfect. We invite their vulnerability. We're saying, I'm not okay, and you're not okay. But that's okay. Like the people in the waiting room, we invite each other into a more positive experience. The opportunity to have a conversation with a stranger is one in which we open the path to joy and to belonging. So once we think about our vulnerability a little, there's another element. We need to find the time or make the time for encounters to happen and then for them to unfold. This is difficult, especially if you live in a busy city like New York City. We're trying to accomplish something a lot of the time. We're in a rush because we're running late and public transportation hasn't gone our way. We don't allow for room for chance encounters, especially if it's with someone we don't know. So if we allow a little extra time when we can, we know we want to do that anyway to alleviate the stress of rushing, but here's another incentive. It can leave space for interacting with strangers. In a study in the 70s, researchers John Darley and Daniel Batson used the biblical parable of the Good Samaritan to test a hypothesis. The Good Samaritan parable is about a man who's been robbed and beaten up on the side of the road, and the religious leaders of the day walk past him, a priest and a Levite. Along comes a religious outcast of the day, the Samaritan. He stops, he picks up the man, he takes him to an inn and pays for his lodging until he heals. So this study about the parable of the Good Samaritan was designed to check out what makes people stop to help. The researchers told a group of seminarians to prepare a talk about the parable. And after being told about that, they were supposed to go to a follow-up meeting in another building. The first group was given all the time they needed to travel to the other building. The second group a little less time, and the third group was told to rush to the next building. As these seminarians walked to the meeting, they all passed a disheveled man who was slumped over and coughing. The seminarians had been measured for personality differences and degrees of religiosity, but neither of those factors made any difference determining who stopped to help the needy man. The key influence on whether someone stopped was how rushed they were. Those who were in a hurry rushed past. Those who had time stopped to help. So we allow ourselves a little bit of a risk. Maybe when we can, we slow down a little. And we can be attentive, too, to moments where we might have exquisite interruptions that are subtle, where we don't even see them. We could be standing in line, or on the bus, or on the train, sitting in traffic. And what do we usually do? One of two things: stare at our phones, or ruminate over why it's so frustrating to be stuck in line, and how we maybe in traffic deserve to be airlifted past all the other people because what we have to do is important. Instead, we can look around at the strangers, the passers-by, and silently we can say to ourselves, may you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. When I focus on strangers and their well-being, it's an antidote to my egotistical, anxious mind, and it's a triumph of curiosity about their lives when I secretly connect with all of them. Now, there is a paradox about exquisite interruptions. It can be much easier to strike up a conversation with a Starbucks cashier or someone next to you at the diner counter than the people whom we don't know well within our own communities. It's easier to extend a hand and try to connect with a stranger who we'll never see again and with whom we may have nothing in common, especially if they're in need of directions or some sort of practical assistance. Now, the challenge when we open up to people in our own community is that our vulnerability is amplified. Our tendency is to collect bits of data. How old are they? Who are their friends? How do they fit into this community? What is their work? And then what do we do with all that data? We compare to ourselves. We silently ask ourselves, will it be okay to be vulnerable with this person? How much can I reveal? Do I have the courage to be imperfect in this person's eyes? It takes extra courage to reach out to people in our own communities. In his essay, I and Thou, 20th century philosopher Martin Buber provides a construct for us to understand vulnerability. Buber writes that modern society's prevailing view of relationships is I, it, which he describes as experience. We collect information about a person, we analyze it, we make deductions about it, and we decide how it fits into our overall scheme of humanity. In an I-it relationship, we are the observer and the it is observed. Buber contrasts I-it with I-thou. He describes I-thou as an encounter. In encounters, we enter into relationship with the person, and both the I and the thou are affected by the relationship. Instead of seeing the other as a collection of data, we see the whole person. Buber puts it like this: when I confront a human being as my thou and speak the basic word I, thou to them, then they are no thing among things, nor do they consist of things. The person is no longer a dot in the grid of space and time, nor a condition to be experienced and described, nor a loose bundle of named qualities. Neighborless and seamless, the person is thou and fills the firmament, not as if there were nothing but them, but everything lives in their light. It takes discipline, it takes faith to work against that norm, to resist merely labeling, collecting data. to reset our minds, to see the whole person. It's risky. It takes vulnerability. But it's a spiritual practice, and what better place to practice than right here? We're an extremely curious bunch. I bet there's no intellectual matter that a few of you don't know a lot about right here. Mixing our curiosity with some vulnerability holds enormous potential for us. It gives us the impetus to approach people we don't already know well in our community and brings us closer. We can do this by lingering a few minutes after worship here in the sanctuary or in the vestibule. If you don't usually come to coffee hour, you might give it a shot and wander a little, making eye contact as we come and go. Buber acknowledges that I-thou encounters may only last a moment, but he points out communities are founded and sustained on these moments. Imagine a world of exquisite interruptions, making connections that transform our lives. Join us at coffee hour today. The Women's Alliance is hosting. We'll have lots of treats, and I dare you to dip your donut in someone else's coffee. Peace be with you. Amen.